Hey everyone, my name is Rocky Meyer and this is our Black Hills home. Today I'm going to show you how I built this 10 drawer rolling toolbox out of oak plywood. I've been wanting to do this one for quite a while and I'm pretty excited to finally have it done. Make sure you stay tuned to all the way to the end. I will break down the costs as well as the time that I had into this. So let's get started. For this project, I first created a model in SketchUp, and from that model I was able to create a nice cut list that made breaking down the plywood much easier. This toolbox will be 4 foot by 2 foot and approximately 42 inches tall, including the 5-inch swivel casters. It will have 10 drawers. The top drawer will be one large drawer, and below it will be 2 banks of drawers, 4 on the left and 5 on the right. I chose this layout after looking at a whole bunch of toolboxes, measuring them, and asking professional mechanics what they liked about their toolboxes. With my circular saw and a door board, I started by breaking down the 3 sheets of 3/4 inch oak plywood that would become the base of the toolbox. Once I had the sheets of plywood cut down to a more manageable size, I then took them over to my table saw to cut them to their final dimensions. The bottom of the toolbox will be 2 sheets of plywood sandwiched together. So I cut 2 3/16 inch grooves in the 2 bottom pieces, and then I inserted 2 3/16 of an inch by 3/4 inch steel flat bars. Then I applied some glue in the grooves as well as on the surface of the plywood. Then I used a roller to spread the glue out evenly. After the glue was spread out, I then placed the top piece over the bottom piece, which I then secured with some screws to clamp the piece together while the glue dried. I added the steel bar in the bottom to help keep the toolbox from bowing over time. The steel will give this piece a lot more rigidity than just plywood would. Now that I have all the pieces cut to size and the bottom assembled, I can start drilling all the pocket holes needed to hold the base together. I went with pocket holes on this project because they're quick and easy, but still have excellent holding power. Alright, let's start assembling the toolbox base. I started by attaching the 2 sides of the cabinet to the base. To do this, I used 2 clamps to hold the side onto the bottom, making sure that the sides are flush with the bottom. Then I fastened the sides to the bottom with 1 1/4 inch coarse threaded Kreg screws. Once I had all the screws in on the bottom, I then added more screws to the bottom from inside the toolbox. For the top of the toolbox, I wanted a 3/4 inch lip so tools and hardware won't roll off when I'm working on something. So I use the support piece that will go under the first drawer as a spacer to get the correct depth of the lip. Then all I had to do is lay the top piece over the spacer, clamp it up, and shoot some more Kreg screws to hold it in place. Then I cut some spacers out of scrap plywood and fastened them to the sides. I used the divider of the 2 bottom drawer banks as a spacer on the opposite side. then slid in the middle support piece, then drilled some screws in to hold it in place. Now I can attach the drawer divider using some more spacers that I cut from scrap plywood. This piece will be used to mount the drawer slides for the two banks of drawers. Now that the inner structure of the base is complete, I can now add the back, or so I thought. As you can see here, I forgot to drill the pocket holes on the sides to hold the back piece on. Not a big deal though, I just got out my R3 Craig jig, clamped it on the sides, and added 4 pocket holes on each side. I used some shims to get the top of the back piece flush with the top of the side pieces, and as you can see by the uneven reveal on the side, I still need to square up the base. I did some adjusting by hand, measured my diagonals, and then shot some screws into the back to hold it square. That's much better. The reveal is even from the bottom to the top now. Now I can start on the face frame for the front of the toolbox. I cut 4 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood into 1.5 inch strips, which is about the thickness of 2 3/4 inch sheets of plywood. This would hide the edges of the plywood base. Once I had the pieces cut to the right length, I did a quick test fit, drilled 4 pocket holes, and then cleaned up the visible plywood edges with some iron-on oak edge banding. While I had the iron hot and handy, I also added some edge banding to the top of the 2 sides, as well as the 3 visible sides of the back. I laid out the face frame onto my assembly table, added some glue into the seams for a little extra holding power, then finally clamped the corners together so I could shoot a Craig screw in to hold the whole thing together. Then I laid the whole base on its back so it would be much easier to mount the face frame. Finally, I laid the face frame onto the base and got all the sides squared up. Then I shot some screws in to hold the frame in place. I flipped the base upside down to mount the 4 5-inch locking swivel casters. I placed the caster into its mounting location and then marked all the hole locations with my punch. Then pre-drilled each hole before shooting some screws in with washers to hold the casters in place. Let's flip this thing over and give these casters a good test. I chose these casters because they are heavy duty, and when locked, they not only lock the wheel in place, but also the swiveling. That means when I lock these down, there's zero movement. That'll do. One last step before moving on to the drawers. Since I'll be using drawer slides for all of the drawers, I had to make this inside of the box flush with the face frame. To do this, I cut more 3/4 inch plywood to fit in the sides and then secured them in with some screws. Yes, that was a Mountain Dew box. It was the perfect size shim to get the piece perfectly flush with the face frame. The base is done. Before starting on the drawers, I measured the actual length I would need for the front and backs of the drawers. This is where my second mistake was made. See if you can spot what I did wrong here. Now that I had my measurements, I could begin the process of breaking down all of the half-inch plywood. I laid all the drawer parts together and took this time to label all of the individual parts. This made it much easier for assembly. Typically when I make drawers, I just make the box of the drawer and then fasten the bottom on with nails or screws. But for this project, I decided to make a half-inch groove on all the sides for the bottom to nest inside. I did this with my new Bosch router table. I went this route because I thought it would help support the weight of the tools on the bottoms a little better, plus it looks a little more professional. Once finished with all the grooves, I started adding pocket holes to the fronts and backs of the drawers, followed by some more edge banding to conceal the plywood edges. Then I started assembling the 10 drawers. I used glue in all the grooves to hold the drawer bottoms in place. Then I fit all of the pieces together and used clamps to hold everything in place. Then I added Kreg screws to attach the fronts and backs of the drawers to the sides. 1 down, 9 more to go. I also thought it was worth mentioning that I shot some brad nails into the drawer bottoms from the outside just to make sure that the sides didn't bow out in the centers. I'm glad I went with this method on the drawers because they turned out great and they are plenty strong enough to hold all of my tools. I think I will continue to use this method on all of my future drawer projects. And that drawer makes 10. I did a quick test fit of the drawers with the slides, and this is when I realized the mistake I made when measuring the lengths. When I did that, I compressed the drawer slides too much and the fit was too tight, which meant the drawers didn't open and close properly. Rather than breaking all the drawers apart, I decided to add a 1/16 of an inch groove on both sides of each drawer. This would provide enough space for the drawer slides to work properly, but it meant that I had to do 6 passes per drawer on the router table to make the groove wide enough for the drawer slides to fit in. As you can see here, the drawer slide fits perfectly in the groove. Problem solved. Unfortunately, I failed to film myself installing the drawer slides, but if you'd like to see how I do this, check out my previous video, Kitchen Pantry Remodel Part 2. I chose to use soft close drawer slides on this project because they'll keep the drawers closed when I'm rolling the toolbox around my shop. Now I can start on the drawer fronts, and I used half-inch plywood for these, and then once I had them all cut out, I laid them on the assembly table so that all the wood grain would match up once installed. I also slapped together a quick jig for drilling out the holes for the drawer pulls. I have a special jig for this, but the poles I selected were too wide for the jig. Now that I have the jig complete, I marked the center of the drawer and lined it up with the center of the jig. Then I just drilled out the holes. To install the drawer fronts, I place the fronts on the corresponding drawer, then use 1/8 inch spacers on each side and the top to line up the drawer front. Then using the holes I drilled for the drawer pulls, I screwed the front to the drawer. Now I can pull the drawer out and clamp it in place on both sides. Then I use a countersink drill bit to pre-drill some holes, then secure the drawer front to the drawer with some screws. I removed the 2 screws that I used to hold the drawer front in place, and then drilled the holes through the rest of the drawer. I popped the drawer pull hardware through the 2 holes and then secured the drawer pull to the drawer. I continued that same process for the remaining 9 drawers. And the building part is all done. I then added my personal brand to the side of the top drawer. Now on to my least favorite part, sanding and finish. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you guys go through it too. And through the magic of YouTube, I applied some Minwax Special Walnut Stain and 3 coats of Minwax Polyacrylic Clear Semi-Gloss. I still had to add a few final touches to the toolbox before I could call it complete, including this 18-inch handle, which is actually just a Moen stainless steel shower handle. I also added some rubber drawer liners. For these liners, I found some 3/16 inch thick rubber gym flooring, in which I cut to size for each drawer as well as the top. And it fits like a glove. The only thing left to do is load this thing up. And that's a wrap on this build. Everything turned out great, and I have the bulk of my tools put away with some room for expansion. I look forward to being able to move this toolbox around as I work on stuff in the shop or out on the driveway. I also really like the extra workspace that the top provides. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I'm pretty excited to have this project done. I've been planning on doing this for over 2 years now, and I finally just had the time and the money, honestly, to do this. Speaking of money, let's break down the cost of this project. All right, let's break down the cost real quick here. So the 3/4 inch plywood that I used for this was B2 red oak veneer plywood. I got all my plywood from Menards. The 3/4 inch is $53.99 a sheet, which I got 3 of them, which brings it to $161.97. I have quite a bit of leftover, so keep that in mind. The 1/2 inch oak plywood is $48.99 and brought that, I needed 3 sheets, so that's $146.97. The steel bar that I used for the base to strengthen that up, that was $5.99 and I needed 2 of them, so $11.98. Also got that at Menards. The rest of this I got from Amazon. The drawer slides, which were 20-inch drawer slides, I got a set of 10 for $101. The casters, which are 5-inch swivel casters, they were $39.99 for the set. And then the drawer pulls, those were about $25.99 for 10 drawer pulls. Stainless steel handle over here on the side, that was $17.43. The oak edge banding that I used for the drawers and the whole base, that was $23.58, and I didn't use all that either, so you'll have some extra there. The stain was $7.97 for a quart. I used about an exact quart for this project. The polyacrylic that I used for the clear coat on here is $17.97 a quart. I used just about a whole quart. Had I not spilled a bunch behind here, It probably would have gone a little bit further, but I did use quite a bit of the quart. That brings the total of just building this to $548.85. Now, I did put these drawer liners in all the drawers, and on the top, it's basically just like exercise mat. It is pretty expensive, but I wanted something that was going to last a long time and, handle the wear and tear. This is totally optional. You wouldn't have to do this, but I did for a 3/16 inch thick mat, 4 foot by 15 foot. It was $137.87. I do have some left over for other drawers or for other projects, so that's always a bonus. But that brought the total to $686.72. It was expensive. So we can't talk about cost without talking about time. So this did take a lot of my time. I had about 50 hours into this particular project. It would have gone a lot quicker had I not made a bunch of mistakes. But it still took a lot of time. And I know what you're all thinking, is this really worth it? I know I can get a Harbor Freight, US General toolbox for around $500. They're really nice toolboxes, but it's always kind of cool to have something that I built. The other thing to keep in mind is, you don't have to do everything that I did here. You don't have to use soft close drawer slides. You don't have to, edge band all this. You don't need the mats. You don't need to use oak plywood. Really, if you can find a cheaper plywood, you can do that. So this project could cost less, but I opted to do something a little bit nicer because that's going to be in my shop for a long time. So to me, 100% worth it. To a lot of people, probably not, but it's still a pretty cool project. So before I wrap this video up, I just had 2 quick little questions for you that are watching this. The first one is, if I were to do digital plans for something like this, is that something that you guys would be interested in? I have it in SketchUp, so it really probably wouldn't be too hard for me to come up with a digital, plan for this particular project. Also, my second question is, I plan on doing a review video of this probably in about a year, just to see how it's holding up and whether I still like it. But I'm also, considering maybe doing a toolbox tour, and I was just curious if that's something you guys are interested in. I tend to get sucked into those little toolbox tours. I like to see how people organize things. I also kind of like to see, what kind of tools people have. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely leave a comment below. And if there's enough interest, I'll do a quick little video. So I think that about wraps everything up. And thanks for watching. And if you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you'd like to see projects like this in the future, definitely hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.